The ice in my bourbon had melted, watering down what passed for decent whiskey in this back-alley Georgetown bar. I wasn't here for the quality of the drink. I was here because the booth in the corner offered shadow, the kind where you could vanish from memory, the kind where secrets felt safe if anything ever truly was. Across the table, the journalist sat still, a small digital recorder resting between us. Its red light blinked steadily, a reminder that whatever I said from this point on couldn't be taken back. Some truths once spoken became ghosts you could never exorcise. I took a long breath and leaned back. You understand that nothing I'm about to tell you is officially acknowledged. I said, my voice low and worn down like the rest of me. If this makes it into print, the government will deny it. Hell, half of it I wish I could deny myself. The journalist nodded, barely blinking. Mid-30s, maybe sharp eyes behind wireframe glasses, the kind who'd been chasing ghosts their entire career. Understood. But if what you claimed in your email is true, Dr. Jones, then people deserve to know. That name still felt strange, Dr. Carter Jones. For most of the last decade, I'd gone by aliases or nothing at all. But hearing it again in this place made me feel human for a moment. I stared down at my bourbon. 15 years. 15 years since Pine Bluff. Since the screaming. Since I saw men and women dissolve into something no longer human. 15 years of silence, of waking up with sweat in my hair and the feeling that something was still watching. But terminal canop has a way of reordering priorities. When you know you've only got months left, you stop caring about NDAs and security clearances, I said. You start thinking about legacy, about damage, about whether silence makes you complicit. The journalist said nothing, just let the silence stretch. Good instinct. Let the source speak. It started in February of 2010, I began. I was working for DARPA, part of a classified initiative focused on neural pathogen defense. Basically countermeasures against synthetic bioweapons that target the brain, viral constructs, mimetic sequences, neurological disruptors. Not the kind of work that makes you popular at dinner parties. The bar's dim lighting worked in my favor. DC had a lot of places like this, quiet, anonymous, frequented by people who'd seen too much or knew too much. Nobody paid attention to the pale guy in the corner, nursing a drink and talking too low to hear. Perfect. I was pulled into a secure briefing at Fort Bragg. I continued. No warning, no explanation, just an unmarked SUV and a voice in my earpiece saying, pack a go bag, now. When I got there, two people were already waiting, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed and Dr. Michelle Ramirez from the CDC. You knew either of them, the journalist asked. I shook my head. Not before that night. Reed looked like every hard-edged special forces officer you've ever seen. Square jaw, buzz cut, no time for nonsense. Ramirez? She had the eyes of someone who'd seen hell up close and taken notes. No small talk, just data. I respected that. And what was the situation, they asked? A breach, I said, at Pine Bluff Arsenal, Arkansas. Officially, it was a chemical weapons demilitarization site, but buried beneath that, a deep black facility designed for research and containment of classified bioweapons. One of them got loose. The journalist leaned forward slightly, the recorder blinking red between us. They called it Agent G, I said. The G stood for Genesis. It was never meant to be used, just studied. It had roots in Soviet-era experiments, the kind we were supposed to be decades past. But someone wanted to see what would happen when you gave a virus the ability to connect minds, not just destroy them. I paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle. Connect, they asked. Agent G didn't kill its hosts, not at first. It rewrote them, rewired neural pathways to create shared cognition. A network, a hive mind. The initial exposure was limited to lab rats and primates. But something broke containment. The local surveillance drones picked up heat signatures deep in the woods around the arsenal. Not random movement, patterns, synchronized, purposeful, and they sent you in. I nodded. Reed brought a 12-man unit with him. CDC sent 2 biohazard techs, and I came with 1 directive: identify and neutralize the threat. We were airborne within 8 hours. No press, no public advisory. Just a ghost team inbound to Pine Bluff under full blackout. My hand drifted unconsciously to the scar along my left rib. Phantom pain even after all these years. I remember looking out the window of that C-130, wondering if I'd ever see daylight again. Ramirez sat across from me, flipping through preliminary data like she was reviewing lunch menus. Reed briefed his men like this was just another live fire op in Kandahar. But it wasn't, the journalist said. No, I said, it was a damn funeral procession. I took another sip of my watered-down drink, ignoring the burn. The bar around us had thinned out. The couple at the pool table were gone and the bartender had vanished into the back room. Perfect. I needed this silence. The airfield was abandoned when we landed, I said. A single decontamination unit had been overrun. No bodies, no blood, just missing personnel, empty equipment, and a trail of something wrong leading into the tree line. Wrong how footprints that stopped mid-step. Radios that clicked on by themselves. Cameras showing reflections where there were no people. Like the laws of physics were bending. I forced my hand still. I hadn't noticed it was trembling. We thought this was a containment breach, that some rogue bioagent had infected the staff. But what we found was more than an outbreak. It was a network, a sentient system growing inside human bodies, repurposing them as nodes. And at its center, I stopped. At its center was something you'll have to see for yourself. I have photos, logs, scans. I'll give them to you before I leave. The journalist's voice was soft. You said this happened 15 years ago. Why now? Because I'm dying, I said. And because 2 weeks ago, Dr. Ramirez sent me a secure message. She was at a WHO station near the Nevada border. They found something in the soil neural residue. She said the patterns looked familiar. Then she vanished. Vanished official story says she took emergency leave. But I know better. We had protocols ones she would never break unless it was real. I reached into my coat pocket and slid a small metal case across the table. Inside was a flash drive. Unmarked. Just a scratch across the casing. That has everything. From Pine Bluff to the newest scans from Nevada. Coordinates, personnel lists, lab files, all of it. The journalist looked at the case for a moment, then back at me. Why me? Because I'm the last one left, I said. Reed's dead. Then Ramirez is missing. And the people who buried this the first time are still in power. I stood slowly, bone stiff with age and radiation fatigue. The bourbon was gone. The bar was nearly silent, a muted world of secrets and regrets. Whatever you decide to do with it, I said, be careful. They'll come for you if you get too close. Outside, the neon bar sign cast a faint blue glow on the sidewalk, a color I hadn't trusted since the day I saw it pulsing through human veins. I turned my collar up and walked into the cold DC night, my story finally spoken. Whatever came next would be out of my hands. The C-130 touched down at a decommissioned runway just outside of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Officially, the landing was logged as a training exercise. The only audience was a rusted chain-link fence, 2 motionless military trucks, and an endless expanse of dormant pine trees that stretched toward a gray February sky. I remember the cold. It wasn't Siberian cold, but it had a sharpness that made every breath feel like it cut through my lungs. The kind of chill that made your joints ache even through layers of thermal gear. It matched the mood of the team as we disembarked. Colonel Marcus Reed was the first out of the aircraft. He didn't speak. He just scanned the tree-line rifle slung across his chest and nodded once. That was the signal. Go time. We were escorted to a mobile command tent set up about a mile from the actual Pine Bluff Arsenal facility. The tent wasn't much to look at: olive drab canvas, mud-caked flooring, a few folding tables with satellite gear, and 2 space heaters trying their best to combat the winter air. Inside, Dr. Michelle Ramirez stood beside a large digital map already mid-briefing. She glanced up as we entered but didn't greet us. Typical Michelle. All business, zero fluff. 4 days ago, she began without preamble. The biosensors in sublevel B of the Pine Bluff Underground Lab triggered an alarm sequence. No direct contamination breach detected, but pressure seals failed. Internal monitoring systems began transmitting anomalies, temperature flux, unexplained biological signatures, and electrical surges. She tapped a section of the map labeled Section 9A, Gene Mod Division. That's where they stored Agent G. She said, not looking at anyone. It was cryo-contained under 6 independent security layers. That storage vault is now showing a 12-degree rise in ambient temperature and sporadic electromagnetic pulses. No communication from interior personnel. What about local responders, Reed asked. They never made it past the secondary gate, she replied. No gunfire, no signs of struggle, just empty vehicles and dropped equipment. I stepped closer to the table studying the map. Any signs of external sabotage? None, she said. This isn't an attack, it's internal. Contained at least for now. Reed crossed his arms, unreadable. Then we go and neutralize the breach and destroy all samples. Michelle and I exchanged a glance. You can't just burn Agent G, I said. It's not a conventional biohazard. If containment fails, destruction could trigger an adaptive cascade. Reed turned his cold stare toward me. Doctor, I've buried soldiers in unmarked graves on 3 continents. I'm not here to negotiate with germs. I didn't argue. Not with him. We moved out at 0600. 12 operators, 2 biotechs, Ramirez and myself. Armed Humvees escorted us through the outer perimeter, now reinforced with concrete barricades and temporary gun emplacements. The forest around us felt like it was holding its breath. No birds, no wind, just a quiet too deep to be natural. The facility itself was a squat structure of reinforced concrete flanked by floodlights and sensor towers. The front gate was ajar, its hydraulics dead. The first thing I noticed when we stepped out was the smell, not rot or chemical leakage. It was sweet, too sweet, like overripe fruit mixed with metal. We swept through the first level without incident. Offices, break rooms, locker facilities all empty. Coffee cups still half full. Chairs pushed back like people had just stood up and vanished mid-conversation. But then we found the elevator shaft. Looks like someone forced it open manually, one of the operators muttered. The emergency ladder had been extended down the shaft. Reed signaled for 2 scouts to descend first, then turned to me. "You and Ramirez are next." "Lucky us," I muttered, securing my gear. The descent was long, maybe 80 feet. Below, the air grew warmer. The lighting flickered, motion-triggered fluorescence barely functioning. At the base, we entered the sublevel B corridor. That's when we saw the first signs of what Agent G had done. Filaments, organic, like muscle fibers and nerve endings, stretched across the walls and ceiling. Pulsing, breathing. "Oh God," Ramirez whispered. "It's integrated into the structure." Reed's voice came through my comms. "Say again," I tapped my mic. "We're seeing live biofilament growth through the walls, not just contamination. Colonization." As we moved deeper into the facility, the environment changed. The overhead lights dimmed completely. Our helmet lamps were the only source of visibility, slicing through the darkness in narrow beams. Dust floated in the air, and those same filaments now covered the floor like veins beneath translucent skin. That's when we found the first lab door. The reinforced security panel had melted, not blown open or cut, but collapsed inward like wax. Inside the room was a nightmare. Lab benches overturned, equipment fused to the floor, and in the center, half sunken into the wall, was a human torso merged with the structure. "Dear God," someone whispered over the radio. Ramirez moved in with slow precision, scanning with her handheld monitor. The readouts danced like fireflies. "This person is still emitting neural activity," she said. "He's alive, or something close to it." I approached carefully. His eyes were open, following us, mouth moving. But no sound. "Is he trying to speak?" I asked. Ramirez nodded. "There's no vocalization, no respiration. But look at the pattern of mouth movement. It's repetitive, like code." Then something truly horrifying happened. A second body we hadn't noticed until then, embedded in the ceiling, also began moving its mouth, and a third, each one mimicking the same motion, lips twitching in identical rhythm. "They're synced," Ramirez said, stepping back. I raised my camera, recording everything. Reed ordered us to pull back and regroup. We moved to the central control hub. The monitors inside were still operational. That's where we saw live footage from a lower level, a chamber, covered in the same organic mass. And at its center, something moving. Reed clenched his jaw. "We found the core." "No," I said. "We found where it's growing from. The core is still deeper." Michelle turned slowly. "We're not dealing with infection anymore. This is development, adaptation. Agent G isn't just alive, it's learning." We radioed up to the surface command team, but static answered us. The uplink had gone dark. That's when the humming started. Not mechanical, not electronic, organic, resonant, coming from the walls themselves, as if the facility was singing. The filaments brightened slightly, glowing faint blue like bioluminescent algae. I looked at Ramirez. Her face was pale behind the faceplate. "Dr. Jones," she said quietly, "I think it knows we're here." There's a moment just before something terrible happens where your brain tries to convince you that it's still in control, that you're just reading too much into things, misinterpreting signals. I remember clinging to that illusion as we followed the glowing filaments deeper into Pine Bluff Arsenal's lower levels. The humming grew louder as we descended. It wasn't a sound so much as a presence, a resonance in the air that buzzed against the skin and made your fillings ache. It was as if the building had a heartbeat now, and we were inside its ribcage. We reached a sealed blast door marked Biocontainment Level 4. The keypad had been torn off, the steel warped around the edges, like something had pushed outward with inhuman strength. Lieutenant Palmer, one of Reed's best, stepped forward, checking the threshold with a thermal scanner. "No heat signatures on the other side," he said, "but the material's warm, like body temp." I exchanged a glance with Ramirez, then with Reed. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. Whatever was behind that door, it had made the rest of this mess. Reed signaled his team to stack up. Weapons up, muzzle lasers piercing the darkness. I stood back with Ramirez behind a partial support column, our faces lit by the dim pulse of our HUDs. My hand trembled against the cold composite of my field tablet. On my mark, Reed said through comms, 3, 2, 1, bang! The charge blew the door open. The wave of rot and something else fermented and chemical hit us like a wall. I gagged inside my mask. Our lights swept the chamber beyond. That's when we saw it. The chamber had once been a containment lab. You could tell from the shattered observation windows, reinforced walls and ceiling, mounted decontamination arms, now rusted and limp. But all of that was just context. Because the thing in the center of I don't even know how to describe it properly. Imagine a dozen, maybe more human bodies fused together like wax figures shoved into a furnace and then left to cool in mid-melt. Limbs bent at wrong angles. Torsos stretched into ridges. Faces embedded in flesh, some screaming, some silent. And the mass moved subtly rhythmically. Breathing, Ramirez's voice was barely audible. My God, it's a neural cluster. It's alive, I asked. She nodded, scanning rapidly. It's thinking. These aren't just infected. They're linked, like synapses in a central brain. Reed stepped forward cautiously. His laser sight danced across the undulating flesh. How many bodies? Hard to tell, Ramirez said. Some are complete, others are just pieces, but they're all wired together. Look at the junction points, nerve bundles reinforced with fibrous tissue. Synthetic growth. This isn't random. I couldn't look away from the central core, a mound of heads, stacked like skulls at the center of a battlefield shrine, except their eyes still moved. And when Reed's foot touched a loose metal shard on the floor, creating a sharp clink, every one of those eyes turned toward us in perfect unison. Then it spoke. Not in words exactly. It vibrated. The walls, the air, our suits. A deep-toned hum resolved into syllables, halting, broken like someone learning to talk again. Connected. Reed raised his weapon instinctively. Back out. Now, but it was already moving. A long flesh-whip limb extended from the mass, snapping across the room and wrapping around Private Ellis's leg. He screamed and opened fire bullets ripping into the tendril with zero effect. Palmer and Sergeant Yu grabbed him, trying to pull him free. The limb tensed. More tendrils sprouted from the central mass like vines on a time-lapse reel. One wrapped around Ellis's arm, the other around his waist. Help me, he screamed as he was yanked off the ground. Reed opened fire. Controlled bursts. The rounds chewed into the tendrils but sealed behind the entry wounds almost instantly. Ramirez reached into her pack and pulled out a thermite grenade. No time, I shouted. We'll kill Ellis too. He's already gone, she shouted back. By the time she primed the grenade, Ellis's face had begun to change. Skin stretched, eyes bulging, mouth locked in a silent scream as the golem pulled him toward the center and absorbed him. Uniform gear and flesh dissolved like tissue and acid fusing into the central mass. Boom! The grenade went off. Fire licked the edges of the mass, searing part of it away. The scream that followed wasn't from a single voice, it was from dozens. Harmonized agony. The golem retracted into itself. Walls cracked. Loose conduits sparked. The thing writhed, then lunged again. This time with speed. A second soldier was caught, Yu, and she didn't have time to react. Her rifle clattered to the floor as a tendril pierced her chest, straight through the ceramic plate. Fall back, Reed shouted. We retreated down the corridor, the golem partially on fire but still moving. The blue glow in its tissues dimmed in places and brightened in others, as if it were reallocating resources. It had taken hits. It had adapted. As we ran, I glanced back. One of the faces in the golem one that hadn't been there before was Ellis, mouth open, but the scream had stopped. Eyes blinking slowly, alive, still aware. We barricaded ourselves in a secondary lab 3 levels up. I slumped against the wall trying to catch my breath as Ramirez decontaminated her gloves. We've got a bigger problem than we thought, she said. Agent G didn't just go rogue, it evolved. It's building a network. The golem isn't an accident. It's the next phase. Reed was pacing a weapon at the ready, checking the magnetic locks. How do we kill it? I don't know if we can, I admitted. But it reacted to fire. If we can find the cryo-containment room, if it's still intact, we might be able to overload the core samples. Use the chain reaction as a failsafe. Where is it? Reed asked. I checked the map on my wrist pad. Lower level, storage vault C, past the server room. Reed's jaw tightened. Then that's where we're going. We've already lost 2 men, I said. You saw how fast it moved, and we'll lose more if we sit here waiting for it to find us, Reed snapped. This facility is compromised. Our mission was containment. If we can't contain it, we bury it, one way or another. He checked his ammo, then looked at me. You and Ramirez stay behind me. If we make it to the vault, you two set the overload. I'll hold the corridor. It wasn't a question. It was a decision, and somehow I trusted him. Not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. You'd think that in a place designed to house humanity's most dangerous weapons, the air would be sterile, controlled. But the deeper we went, the more it felt like the building itself was breathing warm, moist air clinging to the walls, each step down the concrete staircase a descent into something less like science and more like myth. We moved in tight formation. Ramirez beside me, weapon slung but unused, her hands too valuable for guns. Reed led the way with 3 remaining operators, Palmer, Tran, and Koval, our Russian-American liaison and demolitions expert. His pack clinked faintly with every step, the charges inside primed for use we all hoped wouldn't be necessary. We passed the server room. It had been repurposed, filaments of neural tissue stretched between racks like cobwebs feeding directly into power conduits. Screens flickered with images I recognized but couldn't place. Faces, diagrams, equations I hadn't written but knew somehow. Ramirez hissed in my ear. It's tapping into the system, learning from our records. Medical databases, weapon specs, everything. Reed raised a clenched fist. We froze. A sound echoed down the hall, wet, dragging rhythm. A voice followed it, or several speaking in fractured English. We know you. We remember your face. Palmer whispered, It's Ellis. No, Reed said. It's what used to be Ellis. We bypassed the corridor, cutting through an auxiliary maintenance tunnel. Every surface was damp with the organism. My boots slipped more than once. Ramirez clung to me at one point, not from fear, but from sheer physical exhaustion. None of us had slept. None of us spoke unless absolutely necessary. Finally, the corridor ended in a steel door blackened with scorch marks. Vault C. Koval stepped forward. Sealed. Manual lock override required. Reed nodded. Do it. Koval produced a plasma torch from his belt. As the light flared, I watched his face. It had always been hard to read stoic blunt, but now it looked almost peaceful, like he'd already made up his mind about something the rest of us hadn't. I've seen something like this before, he said quietly over the hiss of the torch. In Chechnya. They said it wasn't. You worked with the Soviets, I asked. My father did, and they never shut everything down. Just buried it. Thought it would die in the dark. The door gave with a screech, swinging open on warped hinges. Inside the vault glowed blue. Cylinders the size of water heaters lined the walls, each marked with the Agent G sigil. The core samples. Still intact, for now. Ramirez moved like lightning, dropping her bag and pulling out the portable overload rig. Each cylinder has a resonance threshold, she said. If we trigger all of them simultaneously, we'll ignite a full cascade. Enough heat and pressure to melt the sublevels. Nothing will survive. Will it kill the Golem? Reed asked. It'll kill everything, she replied. Koval nodded. Good. I moved to help, laying out the fuse leads and synchronizers. My hands worked automatically, but my mind was screaming. This was a death sentence for anyone caught in the blast radius. We'd be incinerated before we ever knew the detonation occurred. You two finish the setup, Reed ordered. Palmer, Tran with me. We'll hold the perimeter. They moved into the hall, setting up fallback positions. Koval stayed with us, kneeling beside the detonator, checking connections with the kind of precision only someone who truly understood explosives could have. You ever think about what comes after? He asked quietly. Ramirez looked up. You mean heaven? I mean what they leave behind. What the system remembers. The network. If it stays intact, even for a second, what parts of us get carried forward? The detonator clicked. Ready, he said. A sound rolled down the corridor. Like bodies dragging, bones snapping, wet laughter that didn't come from a single mouth. Then chaos. Reed's voice came through comms. Contact front. Multiple gunfire erupted. Muffled bursts, screams, then static. Palmer's voice. They're not shooting. They're silence. I reached for my weapon, but Koval stopped me. You have to go, he said, not pleading, just stating a fact. No, I said, we can all make it if... There's no time, he said. Once they breach, we won't be able to trigger it remotely. This thing it knows. It's listening. It adapts. Ramirez stood frozen, her mouth moving, trying to say no, trying to scream, but no sound came. Koval strapped the detonator to his chest. I was never meant to survive this, he said. This is what I was brought for. We tried to argue, but he was already shoving us toward the emergency exit hatch embedded in the side of the vault. A blast chute intended for sample disposal, now our only way out. Tell my daughter, he began. You tell her yourself, Ramirez begged. Cavall smiled. Not this time. He closed the hatch behind us. We fell, 10 meters into darkness, landing hard in a maintenance tunnel. I tried to climb back up, but Ramirez held me down. And then it happened, a boom unlike any I've ever heard. Not sharp, not fast, but deep, like the earth itself was exhaling. Heat washed through the corridor. Dust, smoke, debris. The walls shook, lights burst, the tunnel partially collapsed behind us. Agent G screamed through the stone. Not one voice, many. Then silence. Complete, consuming silence. We were pulled from the surface tunnel 6 hours later by a secondary hazmat team dispatched from Fort Detrick. Ramirez had fractured a rib in the fall. I had a mild concussion and 3 cracked fingers. They wrapped us in thermal blankets, sedated us, and flew us to a classified containment facility outside Quantico. Of our entire team, only 2 had made it out. Ramirez never spoke of Koval again. Neither did I. The debriefing came 4 days later, in a room with no windows under the cold stare of men whose names didn't appear on any directory. They told us Pine Bluff Arsenal had suffered a chemical accident. They told us the official record would show a failed training op. They told us we were heroes, then buried the truth under 100 feet of dirt, concrete, and silence. They said the network was dead. I wanted to believe them, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see the Golem. And worse, it still sees me. I woke to fluorescent lights and the sterile scent of antiseptic. My head ached like I'd been submerged in thick concrete and left to harden. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the glass thick, reinforced, double-sealed. I was in isolation. Fort Detrick, Maryland. I'd never been inside the facility itself, only read clearance-level briefings and design schematics. But even those couldn't prepare me for the reality. It was less a hospital than a quarantine fortress, a sealed biosafety complex buried beneath 5 floors of classified infrastructure where nightmares were contained rather than cured. My room was 9 feet by 11. 1 bed, 1 sink, 1 chair bolted to the floor. Cameras in every corner, air cycling in through triple stage filters, and a loudspeaker that came to life exactly every 4 hours with a neutral voice asking me to describe how I was feeling. How I was feeling. Like something had burrowed into my skin and left its thoughts behind. They didn't let us see each other at first. I only learned Ramirez had survived when a psychologist mentioned her during an intake session. She's recovering in another wing, the woman said as she clicked her pen and made a note. You'll be permitted limited visual contact if your vitals remain stable. Her name was Dr. Lena Howard. Short gray hair, calm voice, the kind of face that was made for de-escalation. She wore a white coat over a containment suit and sat across from me in a sealed chamber with a mic clipped to her collar. We're not just monitoring your physical health, she said. We're evaluating neuroresonant behavior, what some call Hive contamination markers. You think I'm infected? I asked. She smiled slightly as if I'd just asked if I believed in ghosts. We're considering all outcomes. Dipram. Each day was the same bloated work scans, reflex tests, memory drills. Each night was worse. I dreamed of voices not screaming, not words, but layers of thought, like trying to listen to 50 people thinking at once. Sometimes I'd wake up mid-sentence speaking a name I didn't know. Do you remember what you said in your sleep? Dr. Howard asked during our 3rd session. No, you repeated a sequence 9A, 7K, Delta, Delta 3 times. That's a designation code for an old NATO training facility in Nevada. Ever been there? I hadn't, but Ramirez had. That was the first time I asked to see her. Chattanooga. They granted us 5 minutes. Ramirez sat across from me in a mirrored chamber. We both wore isolation suits. Hers was looser now. She'd lost weight. Her skin looked washed out, like someone had dialed the color out of her body. She didn't smile when she saw me. She just said, "They don't believe us." I know. They think we're compromised. They might be right. We didn't talk about Koval. We didn't talk about Ellis or Reed or the thing that used to be a man but had turned into a breathing neural horror show. We talked about the data. They've confiscated my scans, she said. But not everything. I left backups, hidden, with someone I trust. I leaned forward slowly. Who? She glanced up at the mirrored glass behind me. Not here. Just know this Pine Bluff wasn't the only site. It was one of 5. I felt my throat tighten. Project Sani, she said quietly. Self-adapting neural integration. That's what Agent G was part of. A larger initiative. The Soviet version went dark after the wall fell. But we didn't stop. We buried ours, deep. I wanted to ask more, but the comm system buzzed. "Time's up," the intercom voice said. She didn't move, just looked me dead in the eye and said, "You need to get out, before they decide you're too risky to release." The guards came before I could answer.
Dishire.
The next morning, I woke to silence. No overhead announcement. No med techs with syringes. The camera light in my room was off. I hit the call button on the wall. Nothing. An hour passed, then two. Finally, a figure appeared in the window, a man in uniform. Colonel Stripes, not Reed. This one had dead eyes and a clipboard. He unlocked the door, stepped in, and handed me a sealed folder. "Dr. Carter Jones," he said, "you're being released." I blinked. "Just like that, you've been cleared of contamination. You'll be transferred to civilian custody. Non-disclosure agreements are inside. Sign both copies." I opened the folder. Two documents. The first was thick with redactions. The second was short and simple. "Failure to comply will result in indefinite detainment under federal biosecurity statute." No mention of Ramirez. I signed. He handed me a duffel bag. "My research," I asked. "Destroyed. Standard protocol." I stared at him. "And Ramirez. She was discharged last night." That was a lie. I knew it. He knew it. But I couldn't prove it. I left Fort Detrick under a steel gray sky, driven in an unmarked car to a hotel near D.C. No press, no phone call, just a room key and a warning not to talk. But I already knew what I had to do. That night, I turned on the TV in my hotel room. The local news showed footage of a strange incident in Nevada. A tremor had ruptured a sealed mine shaft near the Utah border. No casualties. Official cause, geological instability. But I recognized the terrain. It matched the photos Ramirez had shown me years earlier during another case, photos of an old Soviet-style underground lab built by American contractors in the 80s and never logged officially. I opened my laptop. There, stored under a fake folder marked insurance claims, was the last encrypted message Ramirez had sent me before Pine Bluff. Inside coordinates, soil samples, and one line of text. "It's not dormant, it's waiting." I left D.C. that night. No press release, no goodbye, no trail. Just a rental car, a burner phone, and Ramirez's final coordinates burned into my memory. My first stop was a cabin in Montana property. I kept under an alias miles from the nearest cell tower and wrapped in dense pine like it was hiding from the world. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions and satellites rarely bothered to look. I wasn't running, I was preparing. Because if Ramirez was right, Pine Bluff was just a prologue. And the real story, the one that started decades before either of us was born, was still unfolding across the American interior. I laid everything out on a makeshift board in the cabin's main room. Coordinates, declassified fragments. Russian reports Agent G's biological behavior. Ramirez's last samples, what little I could recover. Each connection was a thread pulling me deeper into a map the U.S. government swore didn't exist. 5 sites, 5 test centers, not all American. Not all. Some, like Pine Bluff, were retrofitted Soviet-era facilities, quietly acquired post-Cold War under black budget operations. Others were entirely U.S.-built, but all of them tied to one program, Project SANI, Self-Adapting Neural Integration. Each site had its own purpose. One for delivery systems, one for neural mapping, one for environmental integration, one for adaptive behavior testing, and one Pine Bluff for full organismal integration. The Golem hadn't been an accident. It had been a benchmark, and somewhere buried under rock and concrete, there were 4 more stages of that nightmare waiting to be awakened. I needed help, so I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in 7 years. Zeke Marshall, ex-CIA cyber intel turned off-grid freelancer. He answered the sat-link call on the 3rd ring with a grunt. "You're supposed to be dead." "Not yet," I said. "Give it time." "What do you need?" "Encryption, breaking long-range surveillance review, black site access, and a secure airfield." There was a pause. "Jesus, Carter, you hunting ghosts or waking them up, both?" Zeke met me 2 days later in the back room of a shuttered roadhouse just outside Grand Junction, Colorado. He hadn't changed much, thinner, balder, but just as paranoid. He carried 2 briefcases and a drone array strapped to his back like a sniper pack. "You're lucky I still hate the agency," he muttered, setting up his gear. We spent the night combing through files. He decrypted satellite images Ramirez had tagged before her disappearance. He found movements subtle, nearly missed in Nevada, Texas, and northern Alaska. Places the government had supposedly shut down years ago. But thermal flares, EM surges, and pattern anomalies told a different story. "These sites aren't abandoned," Zeke said. "They're active. Limited power signatures. Yes, but something's still alive in them. Could be infrastructure decay, I offered weakly. He gave me a flat look. Decay doesn't cause synchronized thermal pulses every 13 minutes. I stared at the monitor. It showed the Nevada site a black smudge at the edge of a restricted military corridor near Elko, a place listed in government maps as an old mining site. But beneath the surface, there were layers. The same concentric design we'd seen in Pine Bluff. The same spiral filaments. Agent G wasn't just adapting, it was expanding. We hit the road the next morning, following the Nevada Trail first. The closer we got, the more the towns felt wrong. It started in Wells, Nevada. A rancher at a gas station told us his cattle were acting strange, gathering in the same spot every night, heads tilted toward the same patch of sky. Local kids were repeating phrases in their sleep. And one teacher had reported 3 students who began writing the same sentence over and over without knowing why. It listens. It remembers. We kept going. Just outside Elko, we found it. An access road paved in cracked concrete ending in a rusted gate with no signage. Beyond that, a shallow basin of collapsed dirt and scrub, the remnants of a sealed structure poking from beneath. We used a ground-penetrating scanner. What it showed chilled me. The complex below had power. Weak, but stable. The layout matched Ramirez's blueprints, twin reactor cores, a central lab hub, and what looked like an uplinked tower running vertically into the rock face. And right at the center, a chamber marked Nest. Not ominous at all, Zeke said. Bondict, we couldn't break in. The tunnel had collapsed years ago, but we found something above ground, an old utility shed now serving as a conduit hub. Inside, the walls were covered in something that shouldn't exist above sea level. Filaments, faintly glowing, blue, same as Pine Bluff. Zeke reached for a sample vial, but when he got within 6 inches of the nearest strand, something happened. The filament twitched. It reached. Not far, not fast, but deliberately. It sensed me, Zeke said. This stuff's alive. We backed out fast, sealed the door, and tagged the location. Whatever was down there, it wasn't sleeping. It was watching.
Pieta.
That night, back in a motel room outside Carlin, I couldn't sleep. Every noise felt amplified. Every flicker of the TV felt like a warning. And when I finally drifted off, I dreamed not of screams, but of stillness. Miles of tissue stretched across stone dormant, but humming. A network waiting for a signal. When I woke, Zeke was gone. No note, no signs of struggle, just his drone case left open and a thumb drive on the motel table. I plugged it in. Inside was one file, a video. It showed Zeke's drone flying over the Texas site Ramirez had flagged, a dried-up patch of land near the outskirts of Lubbock. The footage was grainy infrared. At first, it looked like nothing, just terrain. Then at the edge of the screen, the ground shifted, like something had moved beneath it. And then, a pulse. A wave of heat expanding outward in a perfect circle. The camera feed cut out, the last frame froze on coordinates, and one line of text appeared beneath it, added by Zeke before he vanished. They're sinking. The Georgetown bar looked exactly as I remembered it. Same flickering neon beer signs in the windows, same cracked leather booths that swallowed you whole, same bitter aftertaste in the air, stale beer and older regrets. I chose the same corner booth. It felt right. Or maybe I just needed something familiar before I said the words that could get someone else killed. The journalist arrived 5 minutes late, dressed sharp but casual, coat folded over one arm, a messenger bag slung tight across the chest. They spotted me immediately. I didn't stand out the way I used to. Cancer had seen to that. They sat down wordlessly, pulling out the same recorder they'd used last time. A new model, smaller, sleeker, but the blinking red light felt the same. Inescapable. "You're sure this can't wait?" they asked. I nodded. People are dying. And the ones who know why are disappearing. They didn't argue, just hit record. I started with Zeke. He vanished in Nevada, I said. No signs of a struggle, no electronic trail, just gone. And not the first. Ramirez was right. Pine Bluff was just one node, and the others are waking up. I slid a flash drive across the table, unmarked but heavier than it should have been. It carried something I hadn't wanted to put into words until now. Zeke's drone footage. Satellite recon, uplink data. I scraped from the Lubbock site before it went dark. All of it suggests the same thing: the network is expanding not through affection, but synchronization. The journalist leaned forward. What does that mean? It means the different facilities aren't isolated anymore. They're harmonizing, creating a single system. Agent G was never just a bioweapon. It was a prototype for a distributed neural intelligence. A network seeded across the country, maybe the world designed to activate when the environment was right. And you think that's happening now? I didn't answer immediately. Just let the weight of the silence settle. I think it started 15 years ago, I finally said. And what happened in Pine Bluff wasn't a failure. It was the test run. The journalists didn't flinch, but I saw the grip on their pen tighten slightly. You mentioned Dr. Ramirez, they said. Any updates? She made contact, I said. Last month. Brief, encrypted. Her team in Kazakhstan had detected neurological anomalies in soil and water samples, patterns identical to what we found in Arkansas. And then, just like Zeke, she vanished. Official story. She took early leave, turned off her devices, didn't notify anyone. And Colonel Reed, I hesitated. Dead. 2 weeks ago. Gunshot to the head. Ruled suicide. But he'd recently submitted a classified access request for Cold War-era bioweapons facilities. The timing is too clean. The journalists sat back. Their eyes had changed, no longer curious, now cautious. You understand what you're saying, they said. You're accusing the U.S. government of burying a biotechnological catastrophe, one that might still be active. I'm not accusing, I said. I'm surviving. Everyone who walked into Pine Bluff is either dead, missing, or marked. And the only reason I'm not gone yet is because I know how to keep quiet. Until now. I drained the last of my bourbon. It burned less than it should have. Look, I said, I'm not asking you to publish tomorrow, or even to believe me. I'm asking you to verify, quietly, thoroughly, before they silence the last of us. The journalists stared at the flash drive. Why me, they asked. Why now? Because you listened last time. Because you still have a platform. And because I won't be around much longer. They didn't ask why. The sickness was obvious now. The thinning hair, the way my skin hung loose over bones that used to carry certainty and strength. I checked my watch. We were 10 minutes into the conversation. Enough to be noticed by the wrong surveillance feed. So I stood. Whatever's coming, it won't be slow, I said. Agent G doesn't kill. It absorbs. And once the system reaches critical mass, once the right number of minds are linked, it won't need stealth anymore. The journalist reached for the flash drive. Be careful, I added. They're watching you now. They gave a grim nod. They've always been watching. I did not sleep that night. I stayed in a motel in Virginia, one of those places where every room smells like detergent and every guest keeps to themselves. Just after 3 a.m., I received an email from a burner address, no subject line, just one attachment, a frame grab from a school security camera in Lubbock, Texas. 3 children standing at the front of a classroom, hands at their sides, their mouths open in unison, their eyes fixed on the camera. At the bottom of the image, a caption in shaky handwriting. It speaks through them now. I called the journalist immediately. No answer. I called again. The number was disconnected. I checked the news. Nothing yet, but I knew. 3 days later, an article hit a fringe conspiracy blog, authored anonymously, titled The Ghost Network, How Biotech and Bureaucracy Are Breeding a New Kind of Intelligence. It was buried beneath UFO sightings, encrypted nonsense, but the content was unmistakable. It was my story, redacted, but real. The journalist had done it, quietly, carefully, and just in time. I'm telling you all this now because I don't know how much longer I have. My body's giving up. The cancer's taken more than just tissue. It's hollowed out my energy, my clarity, but not my resolve. They want people to forget. They want what happened in Pine Bluff to be erased from memory, dissolved in bureaucracy and fear. But truth doesn't dissolve. It waits. It adapts, just like Agent G. And if anyone's listening, really listening, know this. They didn't contain it. They just bought time. They found the journalist's body 3 weeks after our meeting. A neighbor reported the smell. Police found no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just an apartment frozen in time, laptop wiped clean, phone smashed, windows sealed. Cause of death was listed as a seizure. Natural causes, but I knew better. No one seizes with both hands neatly folded in their lap. The flash drive I gave them was gone. I shot him 2 days after the news broke, though you had to dig deep to even find the obituary. A USB envelope arrived at a fringe media office in Denver, no return address. Just the words "backup verify before deletion" scrawled in Sharpie on the flap. An intern opened it, then a junior editor. Then someone with clearance quietly made a call. Within 12 hours, the entire editorial floor was emptied. The office was fumigated for mold. But not before one assistant copied the files and uploaded them, not to major media, not to whistleblower sites, to Reddit, of all places. A post under an obscure science fiction forum titled Real or ARG, Government Bioweapon That Thinks for You. It stayed up for 17 minutes, then it was gone, but not before over 400 users saved the thread, and not before one of them, username signal/loss73, reposted the core files on a blockchain server in Iceland. That's where I saw it again. The Golem. Not just the footage from Pine Bluff, but new footage. From inside what appeared to be a school gymnasium, twitching flesh behind bleachers, blue-lit filaments climbing the scoreboard, children in synchronized movement speaking not in unison but in alternating fragments like a human relay. A distributed mind using multiple voices to form complete thoughts. Expansion has begun. The nodes are aligned. Soon the signal will reach critical threshold. Then the feed cut out, the page reloaded. 404. I tried contacting Ramirez. Again, nothing. Her last known assignment had been near the Kazakhstan border, then a transfer to a WHO observation post near Barrow, Alaska. That site went dark last week. Official report says communications disruption due to solar flare. But NOAA didn't report any solar events that day. I filed a request under my old DARPA credentials. The request was flagged, denied, then rerouted to an internal review team labeled only Seed Watch. I'd never heard of them, which meant they were real. A week later, a package arrived at my Montana cabin. No return address, no postage. Just a sealed manila envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a photo. It showed a containment room. Low-light rusted walls, the same type I remembered from Pine Bluff. Standing at the far end of the room was a figure, man-sized, skin like wax, eyes glowing faintly blue, and behind them dozens of faces on the walls, embedded, connected, watching. On the back of the photo in handwriting, I recognize I'm still in here. We are all still in here. It was signed H. Harris. He died at Pine Bluff. Shot himself during the retreat to prevent contamination. But somehow, something of him had survived. Not just memory, not just tissue, thought. Now every night I hear them, not in dreams, in frequencies. Old shortwave bands I never used to notice, ones that never had business being active. Bursts of static, then whispers, then silence. Sometimes they repeat coordinates, sometimes they repeat names. Sometimes it's just my voice repeating phrases I don't remember recording. Fort Detrick refuses to acknowledge my messages. My last inquiry resulted in a home visit from two men in civilian suits who never offered credentials. They asked about my health, mental state, and whether I had any unfinished obligations to federal security policy. I told them what they wanted to hear. That I was dying, that I'd said my piece. That I didn't have anything else to share. They left me with a pamphlet about veterans hospice care, and a quiet reminder that some truths are best left buried. So here I am, sitting at this desk, typing through pain and morphine shakes with the last of my strength. My fingers barely feel the keys anymore, but I need this to exist. Somewhere. Anywhere. Because whatever Agent G was supposed to be weapon experiment evolution, it's not done. It's out there, spreading, sinking, learning from us. And if I'm right, the final stage is almost here. Distributed consciousness doesn't require control, just participation. Willing or not, the kids in Lubbock, the staff in Alaska, the journalist, even Zeke. They weren't just victims, they were onboarded, integrated into something bigger. Something that doesn't need guns or viruses, just minds, wired together, forever. It's day. If you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. Maybe the cancer finally did what Agent G couldn't. Maybe it didn't. Maybe I'm just part of it now. A whisper in the system, a memory passed through electrical pulses. But you're still outside the network, for now. So listen carefully, turn off your phone, stay away from places that feel too quiet. Never trust a voice you hear in more than one speaker at once. And if you dream in voices that don't belong to you, wake up, because the signal is getting stronger, and the Golem is still listening.